Anyway, thank you for the opportunity, and I appreciate you coming out for lunch today. The root of this, just to start everybody off, when I started with Winter Haven, DC, it's been almost 2 years now. One of the first projects that came up in discussion was, what are we going to do with Cypress Gardens Boulevard? As Legoland really gets its legs, no pun intended, and continues to hire, continues to grow, what's going to happen to the corridor? Some people will say that there were discussions going on for several years before I came on board, maybe as early as 2010, that if Legoland, or if the next theme park, and I think they even predated Legoland, comes in and is successful, we may end up with growth problems out here. We may end up with things that we need to deal with. And so at some point over the intervening 3 or so years, the city undertook an effort to develop an overlay district which would unify some of the code and development concerns out there. If you know the corridor at all, sometimes you're in the city, and then you're in the county, and then you're back in the city, and depending upon which side of the road you're on, the properties may be in the city or the county. So it makes it a difficult development environment for developers, property owners to come in and understand which property do I want, where can my sign be taller or closer to the street, or where do I have this asset or that attribute that matters to my business. So when this conversation came up with me, I said, well, that's a planning issue that is absolutely relevant and is a point of significant concern. But my background has always been in business and economics. And so I used to do studies like this as a private consultant. For 12 years I ran my own consulting firm. And I would conduct corridor studies like this, always initially focused on what are the real estate assets and the market opportunities of that corridor or that district. And once we understand what those real estate opportunities are and what the market opportunities are, the demand functions of that area, then we can start to think about what should it look like. But it's really hard to plan what something should look like or how much traffic it should carry if you have no idea how many people are actually going to be there, shop there, live there, work there. It's a different kind of approach, but for 12 years I made it work for me. In this case, I wanted to follow that same philosophy, but I didn't want to do the study. And I didn't want to do the study for two reasons. One, I'm too close. Running the Economic Development Council, if I produce the study and it's my numbers, everybody's going to say, well, he just produced what he wanted to produce. And so I didn't want that to happen. But also, I had never really worked in any significant way with tourism. So the volume of traffic that Legoland was driving into the community was something that I was not familiar with in terms of the buying habits, the spending power, and the behaviors of those consumers. So we went out and we found a gentleman named Josh Harris. He's a PhD in real estate at the University of Central Florida. So he's also closely aligned with the Rosen School. So we had access both to real estate, economics, and hospitality expertise by retaining him. So what you're going to see today is a study that I did not do. So maybe for the first time in my career, I'm presenting someone else's work that I don't understand the numbers behind some of the material I will give you. I intuitively understand it, but it wasn't my spreadsheet. It's someone else's spreadsheet. And as Kemp explained to me, it's like trying to present another attorney's legal work in court. You didn't do the research yourself, so while you may know it, you don't really have the finite kind of discrete knowledge that you might. That being said, this is 30 or 40 minutes. We'll get through it. It'll be okay. The corridor, as we initially defined it, was 27 to 17. And if you think it is broader than that, I would agree with you from a market perspective. I won't agree with you from a land perspective, but from a market perspective, you can't kind of pinpoint a place like Legoland and just track what's going on one stretch of road. Your market is circumference. It's looking at the existing buying power, the potential growth of the community, the tourist dollars as well. But then we wanted the county to pay for it. So over the course of a few months, we went to the county and we got them to commit $65,000 to this work. So we kind of had to stop the study right around Legoland, because there's really not a lot of county property that is significant to this study closer into the core winter. So the study really runs kind of from Overlook or Cypress Gardens Road out to 27. So the primary area that we were looking at. And the study started because we had Josh Harris, Dr. Harris. The study, he started it at the macro level like you always should. Understand where we are in the global and national economics of life. And then bring it down to that pinpoint level called Legoland. So we looked at the national, state, and regional areas. He tried to look at both the demand side as well as the existing supply side and obviously potential supply. So demand outstrips supply right now. Most of the people who want to stay in Winter Haven, to go to Legoland, or to be a vendor at Polk State or the hospital or conduct business here, they need to actually stay here because there's not enough hotel rooms in Winter Haven. And when you add the hotel rooms in Lake Wales and some surrounding areas, it's still not really enough. I think one of the interesting components to this is that right now we're about 50-50 business to leisure stays in the hotels in the area. So 50% business, 50% leisure. I think they went into the study thinking it's probably mostly leisure, mostly driven by Legoland, but it's not. So it's very balanced, which is very healthy for the hotels. So as one part of the industry ebbs or flows, hopefully another one offsets that, and the hospitality side stays strong. We also looked at corridor linkage, both to I-4 and to 60, and obviously to downtown and the implications that may carry. And then the local market demands. One of the things that we wanted to make sure we didn't do was forget about the local market. Not just the existing local market, but the demand potential of available real estate that's already zoned for single-family housing or for apartments or whatever it may be, to try to understand if we're going to load another 500 houses in Southeast Winter Haven, what does that do? Or if there's going to be another 400-unit apartment complex, what does that do? So as we talk further, I just want you to understand, we tried to include every bit of information that we could, including the variables that are out there. We don't necessarily understand the speed that housing may be developed, but we know it's out there, it's entitled in a certain way, and it will likely develop in that way. So there's also non-tourist opportunities. When we think about Legoland, when I think about Legoland, I can't speak for you. When I think about Legoland as a driver, and Josh Harris uses this analogy, it's much like the anchor tenant of a mall. So it's the hardest tenant to secure when you're trying to develop a mall. We already have it. Now we need to fill in with the right accessory businesses and components to help them build out. And we need to do so understanding that the national market thinks very highly of Polk County. And this is something that Dr. Harris fell into some conversations a number of different places at some professional conferences where he would talk about, he's from Orlando, he actually grew up in Sebring, so he's very familiar with the area. And he met lots of people who said, oh, we know Polk County. Yeah, Central Florida, absolutely. You're in Orlando, and we know Polk County. We love Polk County. And these are industrial developers, these are manufacturers, these are folks in logistics. It's very well regarded, and I think that by one or two stories actually flows into the hospitality world as well. These are just some graphs about kind of where we've been in the market at a macro level and where we're going, or where we were just a few months ago anyway. This is the local trade area, and the local trade area for the purposes of Legoland or Winter Haven or Polk County, depending on how you want to frame it, is anything within about a 90-minute drive. And that's how they look at these numbers and try to kind of segment the data. I think that that's probably an accurate approach. Anybody from Clearwater can day trip over to Legoland, be here by 9:30, 10 o'clock, spend the day, and still make it back home. And I think Clearwater is probably the hardest place to come from, or St. Pete. And I think it's still very doable. I have friends over there that do it, so I know it's doable. What we found, though, is there's an interesting dynamic working in the marketplace right now because of the baby boomers that are starting to retire and or have been retired for some period of time and or just have kids and grandkids, maybe they're still working. We have a multi-generational opportunity that is broader than Legoland and parent and child. Because there's a lot of grandparents that bring their grandkids here. But the grandparents only have so much time or mental capacity to deal with the kids in that environment. So they love their grandkids, they love to travel with their grandkids, but they also sometimes want an authentic experience. And this is one of the things that may be very valuable to downtown Winter Haven, is this multi-generational opportunity where the grandparents say, you know what, all this kid stuff is great. You know, can we go downtown? Can we go see? Can we go shop a little bit? Can we go goof off? There's a park you can play in and all of that. So the study started to morph a little bit beyond what we thought it might, just by the nature of some of the data that came out. But you can see that the growth in the 60 to 74-year-old population, which some of these numbers I think I get included, which is a little scary. One of the things I didn't say when I got started is I have included a few slides from Legoland itself. Mark, you may recognize this. Adrian Jones presented a couple of these slides a few days ago to the Winter Haven EDC board. And he's very excited and very animated. He does a fabulous job up here. And I won't even try to mimic what Adrian does. But the point of this slide is, in 2011, Legoland was capturing daytime visits. They were capturing that 90-minute drive time visitor. By 12, they were starting to capture more folks from Broward, Miami-Dade, from Jacksonville, and kind of further distances. But now with the opening of the hotel in 15, they truly consider themselves a family-themed resort. And they're looking at a number of different growth opportunities going forward. This should help capitalize on that and build that out. So we have this great hotel here. It's already started to change the existing hotel market. A lot of it's because of the PR. You know, as Adrian says, there's nothing more valuable than Jimmy Fallon talking about. This is their visitor profile in terms of just a location where they're from. So 46% are from Florida, 28% are domestic, but Florida percentage is shrinking, not because the numbers are shrinking, but because some of the other segments are growing, particularly the domestic and the international segments. And so these bode well for Winter Haven because of the performance of Legoland. If you're going to get folks in from other countries, they will be here more than 8 hours. And so from an economics perspective, those are the kinds of things we want to know. Now, when this very briefly profiles when the Legoland Hotel came on board, when it opened in May, you immediately saw occupancy shift from what it had been, where you had previously had much slower summers. And at the green line 2015, you immediately saw everything shift. This is validated with your average daily rates, where Legoland is the purple, and they came on at a much higher rate than everybody else. It actually raised the expectations of the rest of the market, so all of the other hotels now can offer a higher rate. Because previously, I think psychologically, folks were saying, I want to stay in Winter Haven, and I've got a choice between $139 and $129 and a $99 rate, and I'm going to find something in there, that's fine. Now they're saying, well, I can spend $350 at Legoland. That's too, $169 is not all that bad compared to $350. And so there's been a psychological shift in the market, right? I mean, that's my expectation. We haven't actually polled any of these folks, but anybody, please tell me if you think I'm completely airborne. Is it? I mean, when you go to Boston or when you travel, you go to some big city, you see these really high rates, and you don't want to be there sometimes. Sometimes you might. So you step down from that to a point where you're comfortable, right? Tourist development tax collections went way up when Legoland opened, and I think we will see in the coming years huge increases in this, which is great for the county and for the marketing and development of the county. I've already talked about a few things on this slide. From a broad perspective, a worldwide, international perspective, Legoland is still in the early stages of development. And they have announced that they want to have, or they publicly said they want to have some sort of announcement every 6 months about an improvement, a new part of the park, something in the press every 6 months or so of significance. With each step forward that they take, the penetration and the awareness within the international marketplace grows. And we're starting to see that, but apparently everyone still thinks this is early stage in terms of the life cycle. And I guess if you think about Disney, 3 years in would have definitely been early stage, right? So that's another way to frame it. Potential benefits, just so that you have some sense, 85 visitors to the state creates a job. Is that representative? Is that generally what you hear in Tallahassee? No. Fair enough. Not to put you on the spot. I had to do that a couple times. What we're really looking for with everything that's going on is trying to find the best understanding that we can about the market that's driven by Legoland and the tourism, that's driven by RustMat, that's driven by future development that can come in and the inherent local market that is here, and reposition that corridor to be higher functioning, higher value, create more jobs, greater density without greater traffic problems. The first step to that is understanding the marketplace. So some of the key findings that we came up with, current immediate demand today, yesterday, last week, 3 months ago, is 240 new rooms. If they opened tomorrow, they could be filled. So think about that. There's not been any new construction other than the Legoland Hotel, 152 rooms, in 10 years. So we could theoretically have 1 or 2 or 3, depending on the size, new hotels come out of the ground tomorrow and be in good shape. The problem with that is there's none under construction right now. So we are 12 to 18 months at best. Correct me if I'm wrong, we're 12 to 18 months at best from seeing those 240 rooms, at which point we should need another 200 or 300 rooms by then if Legoland is continuing to grow. So we're behind the 8 ball on this in terms of development. The good thing is, because we're behind the 8 ball in terms of development, the fact that we're a little behind the 8 ball in terms of planning the corridor isn't as much of a liability as it would be if we already had 4 or 5 hotels under construction. When you have hotels, when you have visitors, you have hospitality guests, you need additional things for them to do. So it may be batting cages and bowling alleys and movie theaters and other things that appeal to families. It may be more kind of authentic, real experiences in downtown. It may be museums. It could be varieties of things, but we need entertainment, we need restaurants, and we can support new restaurants immediately out there on the boulevard. And we have to understand that we're just working from today's numbers and some very moderate growth rates. We're looking at 3% growth rates for visitors at Legoland. Right now, if you look at 2015, this kind of 1.6 number right here, this yellow, is kind of an estimate of where we think we might be. The numbers at Legoland are proprietary, so we just kind of have to do some takeoffs from different metrics that we have. And we're thinking we're probably in that 1.6 million visitor range right now. So if you follow that column down and you're at 2.1, almost 2.2 million visitors in 7 or 8 years, you have a different opportunity, different market opportunity from 240 new hotel rooms. I mean, you guys can kind of intuit the math on that. Obviously, you need more than 250, or maybe 500, or maybe 800. The other thing that this study contemplated was how the corridor can be most successful is to include smart urban design, good traffic planning, walkability, sense of arrival, signage. When we presented to the county commission, we had to say, we understand the signage out there, but if you're coming in from Miami on 27, or if you're coming in from Orlando on 4 and 27, or you're coming over on the Parkway, there's like a sign that says Legoland, next exit. And that's about it. There's very few visual cues. We know where it is, so it's easy for us. But if you're from Pennsylvania or Michigan, you may not trust that you're really headed in the right direction because it doesn't feel like you're headed in the right direction. And if you're from another country, and English isn't even your first language and you're trying to drive here, you very clearly may not feel like you're going in the right direction. When you get to Legoland, you kind of go, oh, it's here, because there's no sense of arrival until then. And that's one of the things that we want to look at, is trying to build that sense of arrival and develop a sense of anticipation on the way in. Ultimately, if we have the largest kind of a magnet that we can imagine right now in Legoland being on the corridor, and we have the southeast side of Winter Haven being the high growth area of Winter Haven, and arguably one of the highest growth areas of the county, we need to think long and hard about what makes sense out there from a retail perspective, from a service perspective, from a traffic perspective, and an urban planning perspective. The city has a traffic plan that will, or a traffic study that I think will get started later this calendar year, not this fiscal perhaps, or I'm sorry, later in 16 calendar year. That'll start to take a look at the challenges out there. But there's other issues. There's very kind of simple things that we can do. When we presented to the county commission, we asked them, could you assign a staff planner to be the resident expert on Cypress Gardens Boulevard? So that every developer and the city and the EDC and CFDC and anybody else who's in the mix knows who to call. And you don't just get the planner on call who's going to give you an answer that may or may not actually be appropriate for that location. And the county said, absolutely, we can designate somebody and we'll take care of that. We also asked them to serve on the Winter Haven EDC little task force that we've put together. And I would invite, if any of you have businesses out there who want to talk about joining our task force, we want to focus some efforts on this. We think it's valuable for the economy of Winter Haven and Lake Wales and Haines City and Dundee and everybody in the surrounding area. We'd love to have additional input from property owners and business owners, as well as just community stakeholders about how this should move forward. And then we also asked the county to provide access to one of the county attorneys, so that as things come up, we have a designated individual who understands where this corridor is and where this corridor is going, and can make smart decisions and recommendations with the city on that. At 1 o'clock, I have a kickoff meeting with an urban designer that we've retained to actually start urban design work out there. We don't know what that is yet. This is the kickoff meeting. We know what their scope of work is, but in terms of the art and visual cues and the design that goes into it, that's going to be something that they start to work on after a 1 o'clock meeting today. The traffic study will be underway hopefully in the next 12 months, if not sooner than that. And then, Betsy, this is not here for you. We actually do want to coordinate with Haines City and Lake Wales and Dundee and everybody else on the east side of the county about tourism and gateway opportunities. When we presented to the county commission 6 weeks ago, Commissioner Dantzler, being a thoughtful representative of Winter Haven, asked the question, do you really think you can load 250, 1,200 new hotel rooms onto the Cypress Gardens Boulevard corridor? Is that reasonable? And what I would say is there are some opportunities. I don't have the slide in here, I've adjusted this presentation. By certain math, we might need 4,000 or 5,000 hotel rooms. No, I can't load 5,000 hotel rooms on Cypress Gardens. But you can put 1,200. Because most of the sites that are developable can hold 150 to 200. And there's more than 4 or 5. But the point is valid, and the concern is valid. When you start to look at how that functions, are you not better off with a hotel in Dundee, or a couple of hotels in Haines City, or another hotel over in Lake Wales, or downtown? I think the answer is, yeah, I think you want them dispersed, maybe clustered together in certain locations, and that's where we want to work with our colleagues around the county to make that happen. For anybody who's interested, if you want to jot down this video presentation, web address is ec4.cc. This is a 45-minute presentation by Dr. Harris and myself to the Board of County Commissioners. I looked at it last night for the first time. It was actually quite good. I was very happy.
I'll put that on the blog too, so if you don't write it down, it'll
Okay,
be
good.
on our blog.
Thank you. He gets into a lot more depth. We had a little more time. Slightly different audience. They paid for it, so we wanted them to really get certain things out of it. In effect, we all paid for it because it came out of county revenue, one line item or another. But we have to thank them for their efforts. It was great that the county stepped up and said, you know what, we do need to deal with this. And if the Winter Haven EDC is willing to take it on, we'll give you some money, we'll throw some money at it, we'll see what we can do. And now they've committed staff support to it. They're not hollow promises from the county, and that's very encouraging. The city has done the same thing with a lot of staff time and a lot of effort around some of the traffic and transportation issues that are out there, and obviously infrastructure, water and sewer, and other things that they're working on. So it's what we have now, where we are now has been a team effort, and where we're going will need to be a much larger team effort. And with that, I'm happy to open up for any questions. Kevin?
Oh, that's the question I asked you a minute ago. So I read through the study, and some of the things it recommends are uses of properties on the corridor that support family entertainment catering to 8 to 16-year-olds, which is slightly older than the Legoland target area on purpose. And that would include things like go-kart tracks, miniature golf, high-tech video games and arcades, and thrill rides like bungee stuff and the big towers and whatnot. And that sounds a lot like 192 to me, which is terrifying. So how do we not become that and still meet the needs that are identified in this study?
It's a fair question, and it's a question that we asked ourselves as we went into this study. With 192 kind of being the gold standard of what not to do, right? I mean, tell me I'm wrong. We actually, in our presentation to the county commission, when we asked for this grant from them to fund this study, we actually showed them a picture of the corridor outside of Disneyland in Anaheim in 1965, and we showed it to them today. So over the last 50 years, Anaheim has spent massive quantities of money fixing what was an absolute disaster. It was a mess. I probably should have included those images today. When I showed it, the county commissioners and other folks, they looked at it and they're like, oh yeah, it was 1965. Then you look at it and you go, oh wow, that's actually very nice, very nice. It still has the uses. It still has hotel, and it still has entertainment and restaurants and all these things that you need, but they look nice. They function at a much higher level. So what I would ask you to do in response to your question is try to differentiate between the use, being bowling alley or bungee jumping or whatever you have in your mind's eye, from the urban design. Because if the corridor is designed well, with the proper setbacks and lighting and trees and landscaping and signage and things of this nature, the individual use on each parcel will change over the course of the next 15 or 20 or 30 years. So if it's retail, it's retail. But let's put the retail in the right place. If there's a dollar store and we all want more or don't want more dollar stores, we all have a thought about dollar stores, or at least most people seem to have a thought about dollar stores. The function of that individual retailer is not my concern. What that individual retailer looks like and how it functions in terms of traffic, curb cuts, parking, and cross-access to other properties, that's my concern. Because as the corridor grows and morphs, the uses will become more sophisticated. They will reach a higher level. They're at a higher level now than they were 10 years ago, and they will continue to grow to higher levels. So that's my response to that.
So as you do that, because I know we tried to do like the overlay district a couple of years ago, and that didn't get off the ground. So how do we do it differently and better and get buy-in from the property owners? And I mean, what have we done wrong so far, and how can what do we need to do right now to get this moving? Because we've got to get moving on it.
Sure. So the what we have done wrong so far, I don't want to necessarily address.
Okay.
Except to say, it's really difficult to be successful in designing an overlay district if you don't have a goal. If you don't know what you're designing for, it's really hard to get there, okay? And an overlay district, for those of you who aren't really in the know on this, the city has its land development regulations, its zoning and land use, and the county has its land use and its land development regulations. And as I mentioned earlier, the city and county kind of sawtooth out there from one property to another. You change jurisdictions. So the overlay district was a concept where the city would put in place and then have the county adopt a unified development standard so that everything on the corridor could function in an appropriate way. The challenge with that, Kemp, is if you don't know where you're going, you can't get there. So if you don't know that you need a certain type of signage because of the nature of the street, the roadway, the infrastructure that's there, curbs, sidewalks, where the power lines are, everything that's out there now affects where we can go with this. You have to have that vision before you can start to write the overlay district successfully. So the overlay was stopped because it was moving forward, but not with any real specific direction. Okay, that's not necessarily what we did wrong. There's probably a great effort to start it and get something figured out, get some things figured out there. But it was also probably smart to stop it when the city did. Does that answer some of your question?
that area that's the study area, is that any of that in the city?
A huge portion of that, I think 60% of the parcels, but only 40% of the land mass, something like that. Yeah, so it's about half and half with the county right. Yes, sir.
Bruce, has there been any conversations thought about transportation, and I don't mean automobile? Because we're worried about, you're not gonna be able to 6-lane, Cypress Boulevard down through town. But trolleys, that kind of a thing, where we've got stops, you've got people out there staying. They would tend more to come downtown if they knew every 45 minutes or an hour, here comes a trolley around, and which would disperse people throughout Winter Haven.
Sure. So let me answer that in several different parts. One, what I presented to you for the most part is a market analysis by an economist. Okay? But it does in the study, and the study's downloadable from our website, it does acknowledge the importance of things like trolleys or buses or dedicated service of one type or another. It acknowledges that there may be an opportunity for a ferry service. I mean, I think it's a brilliant idea. I think that as we move forward, all of those ideas have to come into play. But we also have to understand they're going to be market driven. So we may want a ferry service back and forth from downtown to Legoland now, but the market's not going to support it yet. So maybe when it does, there's an entrepreneurial opportunity there for small business to kick off something that allows our visitors to get out on the lakes and enjoy the chain. But the same theory is true with the trolley system. Something has to pay for it. That being said, because of some of these conversations, one of the concepts that is put forth in the study is an idea of creating a business improvement district on the corridor. So a business improvement district is a specific terminology that's enabled under Florida statutes, and it's basically a self-created, enabled by the city and county commission, a self-created, self-taxing district for property owners that are out there, where they can tax themselves. I don't hold me to this. I think up to 2 mils of additional property tax that gets dedicated to reinvestment in that particular business district. It can be for lighting, signage, and infrastructure. It can be for services. It can be for police. It can be for ombudsman. It can be for concierge. It can be for pretty much anything that business district thinks it should be for. That conversation is in infancy right now. It's an idea. I think in terms of the Winter Haven EDC and our task force that's dedicated to Cypress Boulevard, we want to entertain that idea. If the property owners that are out there are willing to self-tax, recognizing the value of that tax gets deployed right back into their community, right back into their business environment to help grow their business, it may be a valuable discussion to have. And that's the kind of thing that can pay for your travel.
Can the tourist tax help pay for trolleys and that type of thing? Partially.
I can't speak for the tourist tax specifically. Right. There may be some opportunities on those lines. Yeah. We haven't gone through yet.
Okay. Yeah,
I think that's to be determined through this task force that's working on this. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Bruce, I just wanted to back up what Sam asked. And you're spot on. A lot of this stuff with that corridor is going to be market driven, Sam. Being the chair of the PTA board, which does the transportation, I think everybody in this room knows we're very fortunate to have Legoland. They're probably one of the largest private partnerships that we've got, business partnerships we got when it comes to transportation. And a lot of that stuff is driven by ridership. In fact, we've moved some route stuff around, some route changes. The Cypress Gardens corridor out there right now has increased 15% with ridership because of Legoland. And they've recognized that. So one of the things that we've also talked about was the presentation that Bruce put forward. So I think as this stuff continues to flow through, the PTA board, as well as Polk County and individuals sit up there, we know that this is coming. So we are definitely taking an observation and watching this because that ridership will change. Some of the discussions have been with some of the other county commissioners, possible the trolley situation that you talked with, so some of the private partnerships with the businesses in the area. But Legoland has been one of our biggest supporters, so they are definitely on board. But it has increased 15% over the last few months since they've actually been out there. So
we don't want to ignore downtown.
No, we're not ignoring that. We're
But money
also,
we're investing, so we
we're
want to get
still,
those
we're
people
still looking at
downtown.
that too, on how we can get people downtown
Yeah.
as well. So that's also in the conversations as well. I mean, we've had some conversations with some of the businesses down it, but that's always in the back of our mind as well.
So if you look at what's up here now, we try to segment this corridor in kind of very thoughtful manner that it actually feels. So we have three distinct areas on the corridor, and then you obviously have the downtown kind of central core. If there are 240 hotel rooms that can open tomorrow on the corridor, you can't tell me there's not 50 could be supported downtown. I mean, it's not a plausible argument that downtown doesn't get included in this. But there is definitely a transportation and a linkage issue and a visual cues and urban design issue that we need to look at. There may be some elements of technology that we could weave into that make life easier for our visitors to find downtown. There may be apps, there may be all kinds of things that we could do. This kind of discussion is exactly what we need to have to raise those ideas, but I also have to let you know, we talk with Florida Poly on a weekly basis about different topics, and this is one of them. We referred a local investor or an investor recently out to Poly because they had some technology ideas that they want to explore on their project. So they're at the table whenever we need them if we want to talk about, a technology-related benefit that could come out here. And Polk Transit is an investor in Winter Haven EDC. So they're at our board meetings, and I talk to Tom all the time, and Aaron represents, and it's an inclusive environment right now. We're doing everything we can to make sure that the right players are at the table. And I even have monthly meetings with Cindy Gentosa in Haines City and with Kevin Keith in Lake Wales. I mean, this is a regional effort that, not just because of this, but economic development on the east side of the county is a regional effort. And I think we have to see it that way.
Is the ridership that he was talking about being up, isn't that mostly employee ridership? And my other question would be, is there any tourists that actually take the city bus to somewhere in Winter Haven?
Right now, there is a large percentage of it that is up because of employees.
Right.
It's probably about, I would say probably about 4.5%, 5% that goes other places up and down it right now. But the majority of it is employees.
And if you watch the bus, you'll actually see a parent with a kid get off the bus at Legoland sometimes. It's, just, from around town or around the
Well,
county.
they run their own shuttle from the Bed and Brick partners to the hotel. So a lot of the tourists are captured on their own shuttle that they are running, which that's running often throughout the day, and you see it running up and down the boulevard, so.
Yes.
Discussion about the four corners of the gateway, 197, highest and best use.
Highest and best use. Some of the land out there is hard to develop. Some of the land out there is ready to develop. Highest and best use, as we've looked at it, is an anchor that will complement the hospitality opportunities here with retail and restaurant. So think Lakeside Village, but maybe with more hospitality and less retail. I'll put it out there. I was told, because of this study, because of the numbers that came out of this study, I was told that Polk County at that intersection could support Costco.
Support what?
Costco. So it could be big box. It could be big box integrated too, a pod of more conventional retail and hospitality. I don't know. What I recognize is we may never get to what is highest and best use. Somebody else may lock it down for their highest and best, the private sector's, highest and best use. But I think it does look a lot like it could be hospitality and retail and restaurant and become a regional draw. Yes, sir.
I'm just going to comment real quick on Sam's question there. One of the things that's going to come out of the city's transportation master planning efforts is, you mentioned 6 lanes. That's probably something we don't want out there,
Right.
okay? So one of the things that's going to emerge from that planning effort are proposed parallel corridors to take some of the traffic off of Cypress Gardens Boulevard so that we don't need you know, because we obviously don't want 6 lanes. You're not gonna have a pedestrian-friendly corridor. We don't want people driving 60 mile an hour down a 6-lane road in front of this district. Intersection improvements and corridor improvements before it's too late. Because once these things get built, you know, you just mentioned the 1965 example in California.
It took them 50 years.
It's exponentially expensive to fix things after they get built.
Right. But to that point, and to the discussion, one of the things that we're hoping the urban designers come back with are recommendations around the development of pods or clusters of hotel, restaurant, walkability on sites. You don't have to move your car, you know, where you're not creating additional traffic for no legitimate reason. And whether or not you know, bus service starts to function at a higher level out there, or segways, or levitation, or whatever it may be. God knows what Ghazi and the guys at Molly are going to come up with, you know. But you know, maybe mind control to solve the problem. I don't know. But what we want to do is get ahead of it as much as we can. And it's easy to sit here and say we're already way behind the 8 ball. But you know what? I didn't have a market study 6 months ago, and I do now. So we have a much better sense of what can occur and the level of density that could occur out there in a reasonable time frame. I don't know that we're going to get to 5,000 hotel rooms on Cypress Gardens Boulevard. I hope to God 1,000 of them are in Haines City. Maybe another 1,000 in Lake Wales if we actually go there. But I can't control the market. But we can at least plan for what the market might do and go into this with our eyes open. And I think we are, while we're way behind the 8 ball in a lot of respects, 5 years we can look back and we're going to say, oh, thank God we got started when we did. You know, it's always too late when you start these things. I mean, it is. No one hires a consultant to do a study that they really don't need for another year and a half. You only hire the consultant to do the study because you already have an issue. So, any other questions? I couldn't tell you off the top of my head. I have it in my office, but I haven't been in charge of the county.
Traffic is going to be a real issue. I work at Morganstein where First Street and I noticed, particularly in the winter, at 5 o'clock, 5:30, that's quicker. And I live on the north side of Lake Winterset, which is right next to the parking lot at Lake Lyon.
Okay.
It's easier to go through Eloise than you can think about
Yeah.
going down the boulevard.
Yeah. And that's Advisors is working on a phase 2 of a traffic plan right now for the city. They did phase 1, which was, I think, just the urban core right here around downtown. Phase 2 expands it some, and then phase 3 would be the rest of the boulevard. So hopefully by the time that's done and the urban design concepts are in place, we'll have a much better sense of what needs to happen. You know, what I can tell you is we're not going to stand up here and say we should have sidewalks all the way down the corridor. I don't know what we should have. All I know is what the market looks like it will create in terms of demand and impact. And if that's right, we need to plan for it. And if it's not right, it's still probably not a bad idea to plan for it.
Have the city and the county agreed on the overlay plan?
They've agreed to work together on it. So the urban designers that we're meeting with later today and that we'll be kicking off their work, their goal is to give us images and concepts with dimensions so that when we say, yes, this works for that boulevard, we will understand how high the signage is and how big, you know, the parking lots need to be and where your curb cuts can be and how these intersections might perform in terms of just flow. And those are the things that we want to look at with the urban designers. From that, planners can write the code. But until they figure out what they're trying to achieve, there's no reason to try to write the code. Kind of back to Kim's first question.
Well, we're still at the mercy of the county commission.
Not at all. The county, I mean, I think it's really important to say, the county commission paid for this. The county commission paid for this study, and they were absolutely supportive of moving forward and making this work. The last thing they want is to be seen, when Winter Haven is moving forward, they don't want to be seen as, you know, the less supportive partner. They will be absolutely on board, I have no question about it. Other questions, comments, snide remarks? No? Okay.
All right, thank you.